which moves us to the next point, the NFL draft. There will obviously be replacements there. The Pittsburgh Steelers met with everybody. We talked about possible trades up for Unduze, and I mean, they loved Troy Franklin, and they met with Brian Thomas. I mean, they're guys that are just way out of their reach that maybe there's a reason that they're on their boards. Realistic options when it comes to the NFL draft if they trade Diontae Johnson. And you could even possibly toss their trade scenario in there and say, hey, look, they trade for here and then they pick this guy. You got a list for us?
I do. I have a couple names. I feel like Xavier Worthy, I feel like is one of those guys who kind of
4-2-1.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'll take that speed, and that's a guy who also I feel like has great ball skills. Can play the slot, can play outside too. That's kind of a dream. I feel like he's going to be gone way before it because he's a second rounder. Like all of these guys that I'm looking at are like second round or later. I don't think they're going to take one of those first round guys. But I think Worthy's even a guy that you might have to trade up in the second round for, and I don't know if they're going to do that. Roman Wilson, I feel like is that's a guy we know that's a guy we know Mike Tomlin loves. Really productive on a national championship team. Solid hands. He's a good athlete. He's a little smaller, but I don't know if that concerns me as much. I feel like he plays bigger than his size. I feel like he plays beyond his measurements, and I just love his just innate receiver skills. You know, I don't think he's going to blow you away with anything physical, but I feel like if you can't get Worthy, Roman Wilson is the guy. You know, and you know there are the guys, Jalen Polk out of Washington, but him and Ricky Pearsall and Devontae Walker, those are guys who I think are further down the kind of pecking order. Those guys are closer to third or fourth round picks than they are to second round picks, which makes me question a little bit if they are real Diontae Johnson replacements. You know, those guys are projects to a certain extent. And I feel like if you're getting rid of Diontae Johnson, you need someone who's going to slide in there and be productive at close to the same level right away. And I'm not sure if anyone outside of Worthy or Wilson is really very capable of doing that right now.
I agree. Well, Worthy's on my list. Wilson's on my list with a star. I think that's like he just makes too much sense for the Steelers. Mike Tomlin loved him at the Senior Bowl.
Yep.
He's a Michigan guy, so they're going to get at least one more look at him. At the end of the day, it'll be 3 looks total. It's a very interesting name. Roman Wilson's a guy that makes a lot of sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he could be there in the second round, even without moving. But if you're trading Diontae Johnson for a second round pick, you could probably replace him with that second round pick. He makes a lot of sense for the Pittsburgh. Like Roman Wilson is probably the top of any list in the second, third round options, you know, because just like you said, there's no, I mean, maybe they're going to look at it and say Dan Moore Jr. is totally fine this season and we'll draft a wide receiver in the first round. But I got a hard time believing that's going to be the case. I look at Roman Wilson and say that is a name, 100% a name. Troy Franklin, if he slides, depending on where he slides into the second round, it's going to be early second round if he does slide. And I think even possibly first round pick, I think he could go before the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if he doesn't, if there's a chance he's the back end of these wide receivers, that's a name to watch. Ladd McConkey out of Georgia fascinates me. Definitely fascinates me. Feels like a Pittsburgh Steeler, physical dude. Didn't have, like the most productive year, 2 years, 3 years in college. He was a touchdown machine 2 years ago with 700 yards, but this past season, just under 500 with 2 touchdowns.
He did get hurt, I think.
Yeah, he only played 9 games this past season. I look at him and say, this dude, I mean, he just reminds me of a Steeler. Like, he's just a physical guy. He's 6 foot. That's good enough. He's got great hands. He's great at, he's got good catch points. I think it makes a lot of sense. His injury is going to hurt him. I think he's a second round pick. I think potentially he's a third round pick, but I think as, pro day and everything goes on, he'll climb up instead of back. That's a name. I would say, to me, he's up there with Roman Wilson.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Ladd McConkey too. I feel like for some certain reasons, he goes underrated as far as what kind of athlete he is. Like he's got some speed, he's got some strength. Like this guy can compete at this level. I mean, you don't go to Georgia, you don't be the top receiver on national championship teams without being a good player. So and being able to play at that level. So Ladd McConkey was not a guy that I was thinking about when I was putting together my list, but I really like that one, especially considering what you said about the way he might slide too, because that could be a real. That's one of the few guys where I'm like, okay, I could see him as a third round or a fourth round pick, possibly being like a starter, in week 1 or something like that.
Yes, 100%. He's a Puka Nacua. Like that's who he kind of gives me that same vibes of like he could come in here and make an immediate impact. I think there's a chance that he goes before the Steelers' second round pick by the time this is all done because people are going to start realizing that guy's pretty good. Guy's not bad. There's a possibility, just to go a little off track here, where the Pittsburgh Steelers go Georgia tackle, Armarius Mims first round, Georgia wide receiver, Lad McConkey second round, Georgia center, Cedric Van Pran, third round, and essentially just start to formulate the Pittsburgh Bulldogs and move over to Philadelphia because I'm like Nick Sirianni, great. Mike Tomlin with some Georgia guys, I feel like is a little bit different, and it would not surprise me, especially with his daughter goes to Georgia now.
I didn't know that.
There. Yeah, she goes there from gymnastics, so she knows the athletes. He knows the athletes. Georgia's climbing up. It used to be Maryland. It used to be his son played at Maryland. Everybody, all the connection constantly there. Now it's Georgia, and Georgia's a much better connection to have.
Yeah, Caleb Williams is going to stay for another year, and he's going to be like, "Okay, honey, you got to transfer to USC now. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules.
You're going west. Unless she does transfer west, or he somehow has a fourth kid, and in 18 years that kid goes to USC. I think that's the only way that they go out west and start scouting out west. Before then, it's Georgia. It's all Georgia.